Hey y'all, happy Sunday and welcome to this week's live Q&A session. This is the portion of the show where we allow YouTube to send out notifications that we're going live. If you're watching this live Q&A on replay, please scrub ahead until this graphic disappears and the actual show begins. If you're watching live and you have any comments or questions, please go ahead and put them in the live chat. But for now, grab a beverage, sit back, and relax while the countdown timer does its thing. Then we'll get started. Hey y'all, happy Sunday. Hope everybody is doing well. Had a bit of an unexpected visitor here. Left the heater run a little bit too long, and so I had the door open to kind of air it out. I like it warm, but not 80 degrees warm. And wow. Um, One of the neighborhood stray cats decided to come check out the shop this morning. And there were some hijinks. Let's just say I chased him out, but it took a minute. And so we are now running a little bit late uh, due to that. But, what can you say? Life is what happens while you're busy making other plans. And, cats, if they fits, they sits. Anyway, so today I want to get into what I called intermediate node editing. Now, that sounds real important. That sounds real, oh my gosh, we're going to get more advanced. Not really. We're just going to discuss modifying vectors and some of the things that you can do uh, with node editing. And I'm going to associate that with bitmap tracing because that's probably the easiest demonstration I could come up with, and probably the case where you are going to run across wanting to get into node editing to begin with. Um, Most beginners, when you note bitmap tracing is one of the first things that most beginners will try to experiment with. And it while bitmap tracing is good, it's great, it will require some editing and some cleanup no matter how good of vectors you get. And that's where node editing comes in. So if you're going to be doing any bitmap tracing at all, you're going to need to learn node editing. And that's how I'm going to go ahead and do this presentation today. But before we even get involved in that, I want to give a few shout outs to a few folks. Had a spate of folks become channel members last week and over the course of this week. We had 3 last Sunday and another join us later on, looks like Tuesday. So I want to say howdy to Jim Evans, Frank Majewski, Butch Miller, and Brian Neighbor, who have joined within the last week. Thank you very much for becoming channel members. I truly appreciate it. Remember, check the community tab here on my YouTube channel because that's where you're going to find a link to tomorrow's members only live stream. And we have a special guest tomorrow evening. I've been trying to get this guy on for a long time, and I think you're going to enjoy it. It's one of the more popular requests I get. So um, remember, 5:30 Pacific, 8:30 Eastern. Hope to see you there. Next, I get asked a lot if I can do one-on-one tutoring, and I am not in a position to do that, but I know a fella, and that fella's name is Bull Shanigan. Now, there's a link to his website down in the description of this live stream. He knows what he's doing. He's been doing it for many, many, many years. He gets into everything from the basics to all the way up to and including some advanced 3D modeling. So if you're looking for one-on-one tutorials, Bull Shanigan is the guy I would refer you to. He's very, very good at what he does. His website, as Steve has linked over here in the chat, is bullshanigan.com. He also runs a tidy little ship over on Facebook. If you're a member of Facebook, he runs a group called The Make, and Steve has put a link to that group in the chat. So come on over. If you're on Facebook, join The Make and participate in the fun and the hijinks. And as Kurt Briggle has pointed out, Bull is good and does one-on-one tailored to each person's needs. So You'll find a link to the make down in the description, and you'll find a link to Bull Shanigan's website down there in the description. Just go to his website and he lays everything out right there. Get a hold of him. He's a good guy. And tell him Mark sent you. No, I'm not an affiliate. I just told him I would tell folks about him. So, next, last, and certainly by no means least, I need to give an extra special shout out to my friend Steve over at Harneal Media. He's my only moderator, and I consider him to be a good friend. If you are looking to cut out the middleman from some of these websites that want to charge you a commission to list your products and or services, there's no better way to do it than with your website, your own domain, your e-commerce pages. Steve can help you set that up. He's, again, very experienced. He's very good at what he does, how he does everything he does, and still manages to have a life. I don't know. I don't even know how the guy manages to sleep. It's 100% personalized service. He's very, very reasonably and competitively priced. And he'll do as much or as little as you want, but he will definitely help you get e-commerce pages set up on your website so you can start putting your products or your services out to the public. Now, he's the only guy I will ever refer anybody to for website creation. That's Steve at harnealmedia.com, sponsor of Mark Lindsay CNC.com. And thank you for everything that you do, Steve. I greatly appreciate it. Okay, well, we've got a couple of questions up here already, but what I'm going to do with, I'm going to go ahead and get started with some of this, and then we'll get into those questions as I move along because they kind of dovetail into a few things that I wanted to talk about anyway. So let me go ahead and we'll bring up Aspire and we'll get started. As I said before, there really is no such thing as a classification of basic node editing and intermediate or advanced node editing. I knew I wouldn't be able to get everything into one live stream, so I kind of broke it up. So I thought, well, I'll go over the basics. What's a vector? What's a node? Where's a node? How do you get to the nodes? Why would you want to play with your nodes? And then this one, we're going to get into modifying and manipulating the nodes a lot more than we did last week. And I think there's no better way to do that than to do a bitmap tracing and then get in and clean up that bitmap tracing. Now, as I said earlier, the main reason I'm going to associate this with bitmap tracing is because for a beginner, that's probably going to be your first excursion into it. And if you have some tips, have some tricks, it'll make the experience a lot less painful. So we'll get into that now. And I've already come up with a bitmap and I have that imported into Aspire. Now, one pointer I'll give you right from the very beginning is when you import a bitmap, try like crazy, number one, to get the highest image resolution you can on these bitmaps. PNG files seem to work a lot better than JPEG files do. But that's not always the case because not all files are created equal. But try to go with the highest resolution image you can get your hands on because that makes the result come out a lot smoother, which generally means less editing and cleanup for you. So the other trick I'll tell you is when you import the bitmap, do the tracing at the resolution at the size that bitmap comes in. Now, you can see I've got a 12 by 12 piece of material here, but my bitmap is much, much smaller than that. In fact, it is 6 1/8 inches by 6 1/8 inches. So it's just a little more than half the size of the material. But I'm going to do the bitmap tracing at this resolution, mainly because if I don't, if I go ahead and I hold down shift and drag it out here, we can see the images getting rougher already. And we can also see some shadowing and noise becoming a lot more prevalent. So by Control Z to reduce that back down. So by doing the tracing at whatever resolution it was in, whatever image size it was when I imported it, we kind of eliminate that. So let's go ahead and we'll do just a standard trace. And now there are a couple of ways you can approach this. You can go with color or you can go with black and white. Now, as you can see, obviously it's black and white, but as you can see, since it's on color, it's not black and white. There are various shades of gray in here. So what I want to do is I want to go for the highest contrast I can get. And if I have it set to color, I'll go ahead and preview it. Now you can go through here and check mark a bunch of different colors if you'd like, or you can come right out here to the bitmap itself. And in my case, I just want to go for the black. We'll just click on black and you see how it turns green. It's taken everything that is that dark, deep black and selected it for me. Now I can zoom in and preview it, and I can see, oh boy, we've got a bunch of a mess here. So maybe it is time to go ahead and select a few of these other various shades of gray and see how that works. Select 2 more shades of gray and preview it. That cleaned it up quite a bit. In fact, that's actually pretty good. We've got one little whoopee down here. Maybe I'll select another shade. And before anybody else makes the joke, there are 256 shades of gray. Don't go there. So, and that looks to be pretty decent. Let me go ahead and select this. See if that cleans those up any. It appears to have. All right. So right off the bat, for cleaning up a bitmap tracing, just making sure we've got the color selections correct really helps. I don't see a lot of noise being selected, and that's fine. So I have previewed it. I do like what I have. I'm not going to touch my noise filter. I'm not going to touch the corner fit or the bitmap tracing. I'm just going to click apply and close it. Now, I want to go ahead and keep the bitmap up. But if I click off and then click on, it's going to change colors on me. That may or may not be a problem. I want to get in here and I want to modify these vectors to fit this bitmap pretty well. But I also know that sometimes this is going to get in the way, especially if it's selected. So what I can do is I can adjust the fading on this bitmap. The way I'll do that is if it's deselected, it's that shade of gray. If it's selected, it's that dark black. Well, with it selected, I can right click and I can come down to Object Properties. Right here, I can adjust the fading of a non-selected bitmap so that it's either a little darker or it's a little lighter. Now, this is going to look a little bit counterintuitive here, if I slide the fading down, what I'm doing is I'm decreasing the amount of fade the software is applying. If I bring it up, I'm increasing the amount of fade. Now, where it was about okay for me, and maybe about right in there. That way, when I'm working with a vector, it's not so dark I can't see it, or that I can't see the vector, but it's also not so light that it just disappears. So I'm going to leave this bitmap on while I get in and I start node editing. So let's go ahead and let's pick a few real obvious elements. I can come over here and I can see, yeah, that curve looks all right. This curve looks kind of square, like it got chopped off right there. It's not exactly nice and round. When you start talking about quote unquote cleaning up a bitmap tracing, sometimes node editing is the way to go. Let me click on that and I'll tap the letter N to go into node editing. And other times, node editing is not the way to go. Sometimes it's easier just to replace the vector. And if we look at all these points here, all these nodes and various different Bezier curves, we could drive ourselves nuts with this, trying to node edit it. And if we're trying to streamline the process, usually the best way is to just go ahead and replace this vector with a circle, which I know is only going to have 4 nodes in it. So let me tap N to come out of node editing. And with that vector still selected, I'm going to come over here to set selected object size. And I see it's a little bit taller than it is wide. So that tells me it's not a perfect circle. Well, I do want a perfect circle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight my largest value. And I'm going to hold down Control and tap C to copy that value. Then I'll close it. Then I'm going to go ahead and just delete that vector. Then I'll come up here and I'll create a circle. I'm going to base it on my X0, Y0. And I'm going to select that value in there, delete it, make sure my cursor is flashing in that box, then Control V to paste that value and create it. So now I have a perfect circle surrounding these vectors. And if I select it, go into node editing, I now have 4 points. So that's cleaned that up already. I can move on. I no longer have to fret coming in here and trying to play around with nodes or curves or arcs or anything else. Sometimes it's better to just go ahead and replace the vector than it is to try to modify the vector. But modifying the vector is still a valid thing. Let's take these stars, for example. Now, we can get in here and we can see these stars. I'll move my cursor out of the way because I know the yellow color throws it off. We want a sharp point on these stars. We also want a sharp interior point. We don't want these curves. So it would be very easy to come over here and create another 5-pointed star. But why not get in and node edit it and see if we can do a little bit of customizing? I will replace it on another one, but I'm going to show you how to go in and fix this so that using node editing, so that number one, you know how to do it. And number two, you can decide which you would prefer to do. Okay. So With in node editing mode, let me go ahead and drag you down here this way, Star. We can see that we have a few issues. It's mainly Bezier curves, and there are a lot of points here that are just flat out unnecessary. So what we can do is we can come up here. Let's start up here. I'm going to start down at the bottom and work my way up to the top. Now, if I go in and just start deleting nodes willy-nilly, my vectors are going to go all over the place. So the first thing I'm going to do is come up to this vector right here. And again, you see that little tilde up here underneath the arrowhead on the cursor. That means it's right there next to a vector that it can work with. And I'm going to right click. I'm going to come up and I'm going to insert a point. Now the keyboard shortcut is I, but since I'm in the menu, I'll go ahead and I'll insert the point there. Now, when you do that, you will need to insert that point approximately where you want it. So if I come over to this one, for example, I want that point to be somewhere right in here. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to place that point right there. And if I tap the letter I on my keyboard, it will create the point, or if I right click and choose that on the menu, it's going to put the point right there where that cursor position was or is. So I'll tap the letter I and I've inserted a point. Now, from here, I can go ahead and delete a few points and I'm going to modify some vectors. I want this here to be a nice straight line. I'm going to place that point right about there. Looks good. So I'm going to get rid of the curves. So I'll click off to deselect those points and click to select the entire vector. And I'm going to go around and I'm going to delete some of these points between this point here and that point right there. So I'll put my cursor over it and you see it turns into a set of crosshairs. I can right click and I can delete that point. And the keyboard shortcut is D. So I'll delete that point. Then I'll come down here and I'm going to use the keyboard shortcut D to delete that point. Now I still have a control handle here and a control handle here. So what I'm going to do is right click and to line. So that's the letter L. So I've just changed that from a Bezier curve to a line and my control handles went away. So in real time, this is how I would do it over here. Come up here, D to delete, D to delete, L for the line. Then that's it. That's all I need to do. Zoom in down here. Okay, there's only one point. D to delete, L to make it a line. Now I can adjust where those points are and bring that over here just a little bit. Bring this over here just a little bit, but it'll need a little bit more tweaking as we go along. And the same thing up here. I want to keep that point. I want to keep this point, but D to delete, L to turn it into a line. I already have a point right here, so I'm good. D, D, L. Now I can adjust. And that's all set. So you see, I can go and go all the way around and see if convert to lines where I need to convert to lines, delete points where I need to delete points, and add points where I need to add points. And Let me answer that question. Why not select all the points and convert all to lines in one keystroke? Because I could, but I haven't gotten all the way around it and figured out which nodes I want to delete and where I need to add nodes. So yes, I could do that. Now I've got this here. I could oops. I got to make sure that I'm over here on this software and not highlighting your question again. I can hit I to add a point. Then I could select that there. I can't change it to a line. The reason is because it's a mixture of vectors. That's a curve. That's a line. Okay. It's a mixture of vectors. So right click. I've got points selected and I've got vectors selected. Remember, the right click context menu is different for points than it is for a vector. You have two different types of context menus. Okay. You can't convert a point to a line or a Bezier or an arc, but you can convert a vector to a point, a Bezier, or an arc. Okay. So delete L to line. Delete, delete, delete. Come back here. Oh, we've got an open vector. All righty. And we'll deal with that in a minute. Delete, delete, L. All right. Now I can go ahead and change this to a line, but we have an open vector. So now we have a couple of things we can do. Okay. What if you had two Beziers selected? Could you convert both together? No, because you don't select the vector, you select the point. Okay. If I come along and I select, that selects the entire vector. I can't then come over, hold down Shift and select that. That just deselects everything. You're not selecting the vector. You can select a point, but you're not selecting a span of the vector. Okay. So in this situation here, we've got a couple of ways that we can close this vector or join it. All right. I've got it selected, and we could tell that because of the points. Then I can go to the right click. Then I can close vector with a line with a smooth curve, or I could move the endpoints. Well, I don't want to add a curve that I'm just going to have to go back and change to a line. So let's try moving the endpoints. And that worked perfectly. That doesn't always work, moving the endpoints, especially if there's some distance apart. You can get all kinds of weird things. So if I'll Control Z, just know that if you come in here and right click, close vectors, you can, if moving the endpoints doesn't give you what you want, you can add a line and it'll close it with a line, but now you have to go in and delete one point or the other. So both methods work very well, but it's up to you. When you modify vectors, they're probably going to move. But that's why I'm keeping the bitmap up, and so I can move nodes into position and keep them looking in proportion to one another. make sure that they're in the right locations. And there is a much nicer looking star. We've got, if you look at a star, what you should have is a point on each outside point of the star and a point on each inside point of the star. Now, again, just for comparison purposes, that's one way of getting it done. But as I say, there are hundreds of ways of doing the same thing. All right. Let's take this bigger star. Oh, come on. There we go. Let's take this bigger star, for example. We've got a bunch of curves and a bunch of points that we don't need. I could go around and I could do exactly what I just did, or I could come up here, do a 5-pointed star, and I'll start somewhere right about here and get roughly the same size. Close that, put it into move and transform mode, and go for one of these black boxes on the corner and kind of rotate it. I'll move it down, move it over. And again, it's probably not going to be exactly the same size, but does it really matter? I'll drag it up this way a little bit. Well, that's a little bit too big. And I'll rotate it slightly, kind of get it into position. And this is one of those eyeball things. And that looks okay. It's not perfect. Let me, with that star selected, let me go back in here and let's look at the inner radius. And I want to bring it up just slightly. Let's go to 40 and apply it. Well, that just changed all my rotation, but at least it kept my location. And rotate it that way. Scoot it back over this way. That's a little bit closer. It's not going to be a perfect match. But, and I do need to change my inner diameter. I need to make it larger so that this lines up with that. Now, what I can do is I can get in and node edit this, and I can drag these points to where I need them. So my shape is already made for me. Now I'm just sizing it. Put those nodes where I want them on the inner diameter here. And now put these nodes where I want them on the outer diameter. And make it a little bit smaller there. And that one looks good. Then from there, I can come out of node editing, zoom in, find my original star, and delete it. Now the jury is out as to which you would be more likely to prefer. Okay? You can for sure node edit your way out of the situation, or you can replace a vector. These are both viable options. Okay. Let's see. 8th Center says, so how do you convert a straight line point back to a Bezier? The same way we did this, only backwards. Now, if I get in here and select this, go into node editing, pull my keyboard back out here, and I go right up again to that vector, right click and I can change it to a Bezier curve. And now I've got a control handle here and a control handle here. So I can change that around if I should want to. Okay. Control Z, and Control Z again. And that does work when you're in node editing mode. But you can convert any vector to a Bezier, to an arc, or to a straight line. Okay. Is there a simple or complicated way to make sure that the lines are supposed to be straight are actually on the same line? Yeah, if you're are okay, let me ask you to kind of elaborate on that. If, let's say, you want to, are you talking about moving a vector, or are you talking about sizing like I did here? If you're sizing one vector to match another, what I do is I add the new vector and then match it to the old vector as close as I can. Then once I've done that by moving around the nodes or what have you, then I can go delete the original vector. Okay, its center says I meant on the endpoints, not in the middle between 2 points. Okay. Thank you for bringing that up, because, okay, talking about the angles of the lines. No, not really. Not really. Basically, get it as close as you can with that freeform rotate. And don't forget, you also have the rotate here. You can select your rotation center and make your move there. And then apply, move it a little more, apply, what have you. So this is a freehand rotate. That's a more involved rotate, and you can make that rotation either in absolute or in relative rotation. So, okay, I see here. Because to convert, I mean on the endpoints, not the middle between 2 points. Okay, we have to remember that there is a distinction to be made here. Okay, and I think I know what you're talking about. Let me get out here and just draw a rectangle. All right, and we'll close that, because there is a difference, and this is something I didn't cover last week. I was going to cover it this week. There's a difference between a Bezier curve and a smooth point. Okay. Because a Bezier curve seems to only work in between the points. Let me go ahead and insert a point. Let's insert a midpoint. Let's insert another midpoint and another midpoint. And I'm going to select all 3 of these, go down 2 clicks on my cursor down button. Then I'm going to select this point and go down 2 clicks. No, just 1. So I've got kind of sort of a curve going here. All right. But Steve is absolutely right. A point can't be a curve. Only a vector can be a curve, but you can have a smooth point. And that's where I'm going with this right now. Now I can make this a Bezier curve. Then I can come up and I can go right over the point, right click, and smooth point. Okay. Now that didn't make this a Bezier curve, it smoothed that point. Oops, I did the wrong one. Control Z. I wanted to do here. And smooth point. There we go. Now I'm able to control the angle of this point. I'm rotating that entire point and moving both vectors at the same time. I'll Control Z that to undo it. With a Bezier curve, I'm only controlling this vector. It's not affecting this one at all. Okay? This is still a straight line. Control Z. Let me back out of here. Control Z. All right. We'll leave that one a line. Now this is a Bezier curve, and I can control both points, but it doesn't affect this one or this one. Control Z, Z, Control Z. If I smooth this point and smooth this point, now moving this handle controls both of these vectors. Okay. Now that has changed this vector to a Bezier curve. But it didn't change this vector. And the reason was because I smoothed this point. I did not smooth that point. Okay. Now, there are some differences here. And here's how you can tell if you have Bezier curves or if you have smooth points. Let me Control Z back out of that. All right. I've got straight lines on all of these. If I come along and go to Bezier, and I'll just use my keyboard shortcut B and B. I have two handles here, the same as a smooth point. But if you'll notice, if I move one handle, the other handle doesn't move. Okay. I can move this handle, this one doesn't move, and this vector's not affected. That's how you know you've got a Bezier. Now, I can come over here, right click, and smooth this point. And I don't know if you saw it or not, but this handle jumped. It moved. On a smooth point, these handles are going to be straight across, okay, from one another. And now, if I move one handle, the other handle moves. And it's basically like, imagine tying a string to a nail and tying a piece of wire around a nail. If you move one end of the wire, the other one's going to move. If you move one end of the string, the other one isn't going to move. So you may be working with a smooth point and think you're working with a Bezier curve. So yes, you basically you have created a Bezier curve when you make a smooth point. But again, these two will remain tangent. If you rotate this one, you're going to rotate this side as well. So let me go back and Control Z out of all of that. All right. So that may have been it. Okay, I see now you can add two handles by converting to Bezier between points. Then to remove one handle only, you can convert the other side back to a line. Yes, absolutely. But again, if you have a Bezier curve here and a Bezier curve here, these are both still lines. But if you come up here and you make this if you come up and smooth that point, this is still a Bezier. And this is still a Bezier. You can't now make that a straight line. Okay. So can you independentize the tangent but keep both points? So it's a proper Bezier. Yes. I've got a smooth point here. Okay. So I'm going to Control Z to undo that move. I can come back here and turn off smooth point. See the check mark? I click on smooth point again, and it's no longer a smooth point. We're back to being a regular Bezier. That's something I don't know if anybody has ever explained in any of these context menus. If I right click, you see I've got a check mark here to keep Bezier tangency. More on that in a minute. More on that in a minute. I can press the letter K and it shuts that off. Okay. But if I come over here and I tap the letter K again and then select it, oh, come on, go back into node editing. Tap the letter K, keep Bezier tangency is turned back on. Every time you see a check mark over here, that's something that's turned on or turned off. I don't know why I'm using my hands. You can't see me. That's an option that's turned on or turned off. Okay. Well, it's the same thing with, whoops, why? How did I keep doing that? N to go into node editing. There. It's the same thing with smooth curve because I can put my cursor there, or smooth point rather. I can turn on smooth point, and now my control handles are tangent to one another, and I can make my adjustment or what have you. But if I want to go back to a regular old Bezier curve, come up, right click, and there's that check mark. I can turn it off, and now it's not a smooth point anymore. Now it's just a regular Bezier curve. Yeah. Well, to be fair, it is one or the other, but it's just knowing how to dive in and kind of play around with it, you know. Um, and that's why I say I spent a lot of time just drawing my name, writing my name with a font, converting it to curves, and playing around with it. Um, that's how I discovered what a lot of these things do and what they don't do. So it's a simple matter of, oops, get back over here, Mark. There we go. It's a simple matter of get in and play with it. And what I try to do, I try to break it. And if I see something like that, like the difference between a smooth point and a Bezier curve, and I can't find an explanation, I jump into the forums and I ask people, what does this do? You know? But basically what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to break it because I know if I can break it, so can somebody else. And I don't know how likely it's going to be, but there's every possibility they're going to come and ask me, how do I fix this? And if I don't know, I'm kind of, hosed. So, um, as far as getting in the, absolutely, it's a learning curve, and the learning never stops because nobody knows everything. Nobody. Um, it's well, nobody you'd want to talk to anyway. So, okay, let's see what we have here. There's a couple of questions over here. Brian says, good afternoon, everyone. Mark, I was working on a picture this morning in node editing. I would click on a node and let's say delete it. When I would move to the next, I would have to zoom in. Am I missing something? So you went to delete a node then move to the next one, you'd have to zoom in. I don't know what kind of scaling you have on your display. That might have something to do with it. But for instance, if I select this node here, and you can select the node just by clicking on it, okay? And you see it turns red. That tells you that that node has been selected, all right? Let's see here. So I could delete that node, but I got to make sure I'm over here and not responding to a question. So I'll select that node and I'll delete it. I can't delete it. Oh, why can't I delete it? Well, with it selected, that's going to delete the whole vector. What's going on? Well, let's do that. D. It's not letting me delete anything. Delete point. And there it is. Sometimes keyboard shortcuts don't work. Sometimes the best way to do it is to get into your context menu. And I don't understand that. I don't know why there are certain situations the keyboard shortcuts don't work. So D, I'm pressing D on my keyboard and it will not delete. If I right click and delete point, now it'll delete. So let's see, since I now have two straight lines and no intermediate points, will this one delete? No. Right click, delete point. Now, if you really had to zoom in to find your next point, oh, I think I know what's going on. You would right click and it would turn red. I'll tell you exactly what's going on, Brian. Let me make that a smooth point. What you had is a case where you were not selecting the point, you were selecting a handle. Or you were so far out to where you could have grabbed a handle. Okay? If you zoom in real close, we see, okay, the handles are right there. Well, those handles can be right up here on top of that point. Okay? And you're out here looking at the whole thing. You click on that, all you see is a point. So you go click. Now, did you select the handle or did you select the point? It's not going to let you delete it because you can't delete a handle. Okay? Now, Bob Heltebridle says, do you have to hover over a point for the D to work? Let's see. That might be. That may be my problem. If I hover D, nope. Nope. If I select it, D, nope. But if I right click and go into the context menu, that worked. Hey, I made a triangle. Control Z. But you get my point, Brian. If you have to zoom in to make sure you're not selecting a handle, because the handles will turn red too. Okay. And that was something I didn't talk about last week as well. Let's insert a point here. And it's already been mentioned, and I don't remember if I talked about it or not. Let's zoom out. Well, we can stay zoomed in here. There are basically 4 colors to node editing. You have a green, which is a start point. I'm going to put in another point right here. Insert a point. There we go. You have black, which is just a regular standard old point. It's just a stop along the way. Then this is a smooth point, and this is a smooth point. So they are blue. Okay, that's an easy way of identifying. Of course, I had to make this so big it's there. Let me just drag that down here so we can see them all together. Now, the difference between black and blue is very little. And if you have any kind of color blindness at all, you know, it may be an issue. Just know that. Because that's black and that's blue. Can you tell the difference? Let me get my yellow cursor out of the way. Now, I don't know if you noticed or not, but when I did that, look at what this handle did. Now I need to shorten that back up. Because what I did was I changed tangency of the handles. So, all right. Let's see. I was going to make another point about that. Selecting, being able to select points and versus selecting handles. So I've got a handle right here. I can hold down Shift. I've got a handle right there, and I've got a handle right here. Then I can cursor down, and I'm changing the angle of those handles, but I'm not moving those points. So I can move these simultaneously. I can box, whoops, that was a mistake, Control Z. I can box select, nope, I gotta zoom in a little bit more, so I'm grabbing the handles and not the vectors. I can box select those vectors, or those handles rather, and move them around without moving the points. And I'm just using my cursor up and down buttons right now. And yes, I can use cursor left and cursor right as well. I can do them in combination, but I guess I wasn't quick enough on hitting both at the same time. All right. Maybe Vectric can make the colors user assignable in preferences for folks with color issue. You know what? I don't know if that's even an option, Sargon. It may already be an option, and I just don't know it. But I agree with you. I do agree with you. If they were a little bit more, you know, just make it a lighter shade of blue so that you could see, you know. Okay, now the bad part of using that method of using your cursor arrows to nudge those points is that if you look, each one of those nudges, I'm Control Zing. Okay, let me select so you can follow the handles. I'm Control Zing. That's only going to allow you to go back a certain amount of time. So all of this bending and twisting I did was for naught. So, you know, let's make that a line, make that a line, and make this a line so I can get back to what they were before. Now, both of these, both of those were Beziers. Okay. All right. I'm going to get into that right now. Okay. So what I'll do is, whoops, I'll select that, and now I'll make these out here. I'll make this Bezier, and I'll make this a Bezier. Or is it already a Bezier? Yep, it's already a Bezier. Let me shorten that control handle down. Okay. Nope, it's a smooth curve, a smooth point. Bunk, got rid of that. Now I can bring that down and this down. In fact, I'm just going to turn that. Yes, I'll turn that to a line. Okay. So now tangency. Brooks had a question on that. Is keep Bezier tangency something you could talk about today? Sure. And I'll get to that right now. When you right click, we have keep Bezier tangency selected. Okay. Keyboard shortcut to that is K. If I click off and I tap the letter K on my keyboard, there's no obvious difference. Now I right click and keep Bezier tangency is turned off. That check mark is gone. Okay. I'm gonna leave it off, select the vector, and now if I grab hold of this vector and I just start dragging, you see how those control handles are moving? They're moving independently of one another. Okay. Let me control Z that. Now I'll keep the Bezier tangency turned on. I'll grab hold of the vector and I'll pull. And you see how the endpoints and those control handles stay together. They're crossing one another. Instead of just pulling, in this case, they've crossed one another and are going in opposite directions. And you can see my vector created a loop. All right. Control Z. When I pull down this way, those control handles are staying in the same, they're moving in the same direction. They're just projecting further out. That's what that tangency is. Now, if I control Z that, and I turn it back off, keeping the tangency, and I move this, the endpoints move. And you see how the vector is now reacting. These two control handles never crossed one another, and there's no loop. They didn't get locked into that position. They're free to move around and rotate with that point, as it were. But if I hit the letter K to turn that tangency back on, now when I move them up, they're going to stay tangent to their start position. Does that make sense? Control Z, Control Z, Control Z. And one more for good measure. There we go. Did that make any sense? That's what let's see. Michael Mazalik says, hold the control key, then move the vector when in the K option. Oh, okay. Let's do that. So that means I'm going to have to control Y. And that was something I said the other day. Remember, control Z is undo, control Y is redo. All right, hold the control key when you move the vector when in the K option. All right, let's make sure my K option is on. It is. All right, so I'm going to hold down control and drag the vector. And what am I doing here? I'm moving the entire thing. Ain't I? Wow, okay. Wow, all right. I see what that does. I can just move that part of the vector Control Z. See, there was an example of that. I just grabbed the handle. Wow. Okay. Thank you, Michael. That's cool. That's very cool. Okay. Oh, I'm sure it's documented. It's just I ain't come across that in the documentation. Okay, Michael says, okay, you've frozen the angle. All right, I get it. I get it. So, and make sure keep Bezier transparency is on. It is. So I'll come over here, hold down Control, and yeah, you've frozen the angle. So these control handles are not going to move. All right. That makes sense. Okay, got it. It's actually pretty cool. Thank you. All right. Okay. I'm not ignoring you, David. I've got questions ahead of you here. Let's see. Okay. Dale Huffman says, I have V-carve Pro, tried to use node editing after distorting letters. All it will do is the four corners and the bounding box. Any way to do this other than to start over? Yes, you missed one step, and I'll get into that. Let me just grab something here real quick. And come on, there we go. I'll do the letter M, boink. And yeah, that's fine. We'll put it right there. Okay. I'm going to get rid of you. Done with you. I'm done with you. You're gone. All right. And we're going to distort that. So let's go to the distort tool. And we're going to use a bounding box. And let's see. Let's apply. And now I'm moving it up that way just to make this weird, and I'll move this down that way to make it a little weirder. Now you notice we only have the 4 points, Dale. What you need to do from here is bake the distortion. Okay? Because if I close it and all looks well, and I go to select it and go into node editing, I've still got those 4 points. Okay? Let me select it, come out of node editing first, select it, go back into the distort tool. You need to bake the distortion. Okay? Transform object, bake the distortion, close it. Now with it selected, if I go into node editing, there's all my nodes. Okay? So it's as simple as that. After you're finished distorting whatever it is, come back. After apply, you have to bake that distortion. All right? So, let's see. So keep Bezier tangency means that when you add a constraint for the curve to pass through some point, it would keep the original tangency direction of the ends of the, yes. Yes. So, let's see here. Okay, I got rid of that. Okay, David Vortex 8 wants to know, is there an easy way to repair or delete vectors that may be on top of one another when making vectors from images? The first thing I would say would be to, let's hide that. First thing I would say would be to use the, well, there's a couple of ways of going about it. I don't have a good example of that set up right here right now, but right click, go to selection, select all duplicate vectors. if there are no duplicate vectors, like here, the best you can do is zoom way in and see if you can see another vector there. This is one of the reasons why it is beneficial when you're doing something like I demonstrated earlier, where I drew this star over the star that was there. It's beneficial to, once you have this star created, or even before you have this star created, do it in a separate layer. That way, when you, for instance, if I go up here and I add a new layer, all right, and we'll just call it layer 2, but I will change the color to red, all right, and that's now my active layer. Anything I do out here is going to be in layer 2, okay. I want to replace this star, so I'll go ahead and do it this way. I'll drag a star out to the approximate size and close it, then spin it around, kind of, sort of, correct. Then drag it down so that that's right there on that inside corner. Go into node editing and adjust it so that it's the same size. Okay. And move these points. You get the message. You understand what I'm doing. Now I'm doing everything I can from a distance to make a duplicate vector, or at least get as close to duplicating as possible. It's not going to be perfect. Zoom in, boy. There you go. All right. And we'll put that one up there. Now, for all intents and purposes, I have a vector on top of vector. And it could be trouble trying to go in and find it. The difference being, David, is now, because I drew that on a separate layer, I can come up, make this layer active, turn off that layer, so the red went away. Then I can come in and just delete that first vector. Come back and turn my other layer on. And there we go. Okay, what I'm talking about is when it makes a vector and you can't tell there's another one there. Well, and that's why I'm suggesting you do this on a separate layer. That way, if you should cross over a vector, they're not on the same layer, unless you want them to be on the same layer, in which case you're going to have to go in and trim. Or maybe I'm not understanding what you're saying. Yes, and that's exactly what I'm talking about. Select the vector, move it to a new layer, then shut off that layer. If you still see a vector there, there were two. Yes. Usually the vector will be darker than the others, but not always, John. I've had that issue. I've had that issue myself. So for instance, if I come in and I know I replaced this one, so I will, whoops, I'm in node edit. I got to come out of node edit, select it, right click, move to layer 2. So now that one's red. And that was the first one I replaced. Select it, move to layer 2. And now that one's red as well. So if I come up and I turn off layer 2, my stars have disappeared. But I can safely go in and delete any other stars that happen to be there or be left behind. So what I try to do when I'm layering vectors, or when I'm drawing vectors or using layers, is I try to be consistent. So for this one, for instance, I would put all the stars on one layer. After I clean them up, or recreate them, one of the two. I can also get in and then come back to the original layer and delete the original vectors that were bitmap traced. So, holy cow, it's already been almost an hour and a half. I wanted to go further in this, but you guys have some excellent questions, so I'm not going to be able to. Tell you what, we can go further next week. I do have one more question here. H. Center says, one more question, say on spirals with hundreds of nodes. How do you minimize the number of nodes, but keep the curve shape to reduce computational resources? Okay. Let me entertain you. Let me add a new layer, and we'll just call that layer 3. Enter. And I'm going to turn off all these other layers. So I've got a blank screen. And I'm going to go into my spiral gadget maker. And we'll use logarithmic x and y 0, width 6, 3 times around. Let's go more times around than that. Let's go 4 times around, arbitrary 2, and we'll apply. We'll close. Okay, so I've got a spiral here. All right. Now I'm going to go into node editing, and let's look at it. No, brother, what a mess. Look at all the points. Each one of them is a line. Now, if I want to be sure of that, I can right click and I can see to line is grayed out. So this entire spiral is made of short line segments. There's a very quick, easy way to reduce the number of points without gang selecting anything. We just select the entire vector. Under Edit Objects, 3 rows down, third icon in, Curve Fit. Click on that, and that highlights all the points that are in this spiral. Now I can either fit circular arcs to this shape, I could fit Bezier curves to this shape, or I could fit straight lines to this shape. Well, it's already straight lines, and we see what that's given us. Let's try Bezier curves. And I'm going to preview that and look at the number of points that has reduced it down to. Let's try circular arcs and see if that's any better. Let's preview that. It's about the same, but I think I'll leave it at circular arcs. Actually, Bezier curves had fewer points, but let's leave it at circular arcs. So now with it selected and I go into node edit mode, that's a lot fewer points. So I will Control Z that, and you see how many points we had. Control Y, come on. And you see how many points we have now. Right there, curve fit to the selected vectors. Eyal, we were talking about selecting certain vectors and converting them to Bezier curve. Oops, excuse me. And converting them to Bezier curves when we were in node editing. You can't select more than one vector here, but you can. You have to cut the vector. You can, let's say I wanted to convert these two to Beziers, but leave all the rest of these arcs. I could come over here and cut the vector. Then I could use this to make these two Bezier curves. So now go into node edit. These are Bezier curves, but these are arcs. And now I can join these, join vectors with a smooth curve. There, now these are all arcs, but these two are Bezier curves. So it can be done, just not from within node editing. Now, once this thing is done, yes, I can come over here and I can go one by one and change these to Bezier curves if I want to. Or I can just come out of node editing, select the whole thing, and use curve fit, Bezier curves, preview, OK. Now if I go into node editing, they're all Bezier curves. So, all right. Okay, I will there's a few people here that are saying yes, they would like to do the uh, another one on node editing. I did have another file up here to play with and kind of show a little bit about working with text and what have you from within node editing, but we can save that for next week. How's that sound? Is one better than the other between Beziers and arcs? Now, let me go ahead and take this back down here. We don't need that anymore, and we don't need that anymore. I have an unpopular opinion because this is a loaded question, and you wouldn't think it would be. I have never had an issue with Bezier curves. I've never had an issue. But machinists will get a hold of me on occasion and tell me how I'm basically destroying Western civilization because control software doesn't recognize Bezier curves. They only recognize arcs. You need to go in there and change all those to arcs. And I don't, and it still continues to work. Is one better than the other? I haven't found a difference. I really haven't. I haven't found a difference. And not all machinists do that. Most of them leave me alone. But some of them will come back and tell me that I'm as messed up as a football bat. And, in some ways I am. But it's kind of like the aeronautical engineers that will argue till the cows come home that it's impossible for bumblebees to fly, while trillions of bumblebees worldwide are going to continue to ignore those experts and fly anyway. I've never had an issue with Bezier curves. Bezier curves are more difficult to calculate. Well, that's why I have a computer and I'm not trying to type this out longhand. If my computer can't handle this calculation, I need a computer. So, okay. Bezier curve is not always a true curve. Curves are. Okay. But again, I've never had an issue carving anything using Bezier curves versus an arc. So, there may be a difference, but I can't tell by looking at it. And at the end of the day, that's what's important is the final project. Um, and I don't I'm not out to antagonize or provoke anybody, and I'm certainly not here to argue with anybody about anything. There may be complete legitimate arguments to you need to change that to circular arcs. But I figure if I'm getting a good end result, that's all that matters. We spend a lot of time and it's endemic. I mean, we can do nothing about it. We spend a lot of time worrying about the math and what the computer says is the exact center. And is this right? And is that right? And the other right? And it's another one of those cases of back up, look at the entire project. And if you're getting the result you wanted, who cares? I mean, yeah, it may not be exactly in the middle, but if it looks good, does it really matter if it's exactly in the center? That's 3 thousandths off. Really? Can you tell by looking? You know. So, all right, you are way above my pay grade and starting to sound like Charlie Brown's teacher. That's just my brain. I have no idea what you're talking about, man. But good on you, okay? Let's see here. Also, I assume if you will have a large file with enough Bezier curves and you make them into G code, the G code would be much larger than the one made with arcs. It may be. It may be. But as 8th Center just said, if it looks like a spiral when it's done, I'm happy enough. And that's another one of those issues on wood for woodworking. There you go. Those are issues that would not matter when cutting wood. Exactly. But might be significant when we're cutting metal. I'm not a machinist. Never claimed to be one. I'm a woodworker. Always have been. You know, I have some machinist friends of mine that say they absolutely hate working with wood because when they weld it, it just sits there and smokes. And I've had zero luck using Titebond to hold two pieces of metal together. They're different critters. It's a different process. I'm not a machinist, never been a machinist, never claimed to be a machinist. If you are a machinist, you're talking to the wrong guy. Because I don't know jack, diddly, or squat about machining metal. I've always held those guys up with a little bit of, I still think there's some mystical voodoo in what they do, because I'm here to tell you, lines on a tape measure don't go that small, you know? So, yeah, it may make a difference in machining metal, but I've got pallet wood stacked up on my tape. There's nothing precision about the material I'm using. It'll be three different thicknesses in the same half inch. So, so it's uh, yeah, but you're using a plasma cutter, Jack. I mean, Jack converted his CNC router to a plasma cutter, which I think is cool. There's still some mystical voodoo in there with me as well. But you know, you're not running a Bridgeport. And again, that ain't a Bridgeport. So, all right, let's go ahead and count on next week. Um, we'll do another node editing, and I'll try to get into the text and things like that that I was going to try to do today. But you guys have great questions. Keep them coming. Um, so channel members, remember, tomorrow, special guest, you know who he is. I've been trying to get him on since November. And finally, this coming week, he's going to be joining us. Check the community tab here on my YouTube channel, and you'll find the link to tomorrow's members only live stream. Again, 5:30 Pacific, 8:30 Eastern, with no time limit. We'll go until you guys bail or you're tired of listening to me. If you don't know what I'm talking about, or you'd like some information on becoming a channel member, click that little join button down there by the subscribe button. A panel will pop up and a video will play, tell you all about channel membership. So next week, more node editing. And that's it. So have a great rest of your Sunday or Monday for those of you in the Southern Hemisphere. And yeah, bye, y'all. Have a great one. See you next week. Thank you.